So I think from my side, there's a couple of different angles we can come at this. There's the technology angle, there's the service angle, and then there's people.
Welcome back to another Tech Times exclusive. Today we're talking to the founder of Inbeta, James Nash. James, welcome to Tech Times exclusives.
Chris, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in if we can. Could you just tell us about Inbeta and what it is you guys do over there?
Look, it's Inbeta if you're European, and Beta if you're in the UK, and Beta if you're in America. The business is a leadership performance business. We identify, define, and develop talents. So we span the entire talent acquisition journey, and then into L&D and onboarding, building basically executive leadership teams and operational boards for big consumer businesses and public brands.
I think most people, like myself, are very curious about the difference that Inbeta has set out to make. Like, what is it that you're doing that's like, oh yeah, this is exactly what we need?
Okay, so I think from my side, there's a couple of different angles we can come at this. There's the technology angle, there's the service angle, and then there's people. At the executive level in a lot of the organizations, it's a bit of a merry-go-round, and headhunters move people from place A to place B, and it's great if you're a high-profile individual at the top of a company and you've got a really great public profile, but there's other individuals that are trying to come up and potentially not surfaced, and that's one of the big things we do at Inbeta is kind of surfaced, unrecognized talent, and we use technology in a massive way to do that. Then it's a case of a definition of a person. I think is a really good thing to go into. Again, we use technology to heavily do that, but we define them very differently, which removes, or not removes it entirely, but heavily mitigates headhunter bias, affinity biases, and it allows companies to start to be able to dissect, influence, and measure talent strategy. And then finally, it's the human element. We go far further and we use all the technology and the data that we've collated throughout our processes to help integrate, transition, onboard, and accelerate individuals. And so it's the combination of those three areas that make this quite interesting and quite special.
Okay, great. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of get it, especially now how the world has drastically changed over the last couple of years, and I personally do not see this change ever reverting back even slightly to what it was before, as far as flexibility in companies and employees, or maybe not employees, but those people searching for jobs are now placing a lot of weight on the flexibility angle of a position.
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, in the UK specifically, there's words bounded around like the great resignation maybe coming because people want more flexibility and fluidity in the way that they work. I have experienced a little bit of it recently. We did have somebody turn down a piece of work at the final stage because of the lack of that flexibility. But at the same time, I think it's when you're looking at board directors need to be present in organizations. People need to see them, need to engage with them, need to learn off them, need to feel empowered. And that is quite difficult to do in a digital only environment. Don't get me wrong, certain companies do it incredibly well. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head one which would be relevant to your audience. Like, for example, Shopify, the technology platform that is used for small sellers to some quite significant sized organizations. To my knowledge, they're pretty remote as a business globally, and they do it really very, very well. So I've heard and read about, and I know some of the directors there, but I guess, yeah, it's the flexibility thing. is a change, but it doesn't really affect what we do. And then the other thing I think we would need to break down is the difference between job seekers and people who are being headhunted, because we're not really the right type of firm to help job seekers. Put it that way. We don't really advertise our jobs, or very rarely do we advertise our jobs. So that's difficult from that side, and that's where platforms like LinkedIn and everything come into great situations, because that can be a way of job seeking. Or the other interesting one is the freelance talent at the moment, using platforms like Upwork and Fiverr and so to speak. But from Inbeta's perspective, we use it, and our proposition is quite different. I mean, look, to break it down, we call it identification, definition, development. First, we use technology to ID. And what we do is we look at an organization by consolidating vast quantities of real-time data, big global data lakes that are constantly monitored and updated. So, for example, if we look at pretty much any organization in the Western world, in literally seconds, we can tell you most things about them that are interesting from our sites. The best way of describing it is we've built like a pair of glasses that allow us to peer in and organize and construct data, and then take what we want to be able to execute on. So, for example, that will tell us all the people in an organization, or it will tell us the contact details. It tells us all information about them in the public domain. It tells us what technology they're using by departments. It tells us what they are Googling by search history and monitoring outgoing web traffic. It tells us the most likely org structures using AI and pattern recognition. And this allows us to headhunt quite differently, because one, if you're a high profile individual and you've got a great profile, you'll be very easy to research and do something about. But by looking at the org structures and the team structures around that individual, we can go down, around, left, right, and see who are the people helping support that individual. And then this is the unsurfaced talent of the future. So the ID side is very different. Moving into the next stage, that definition side, again, for us, so a lot of our conversations like this, video interviews, etc., we can run a module in the background of this video interview that measures biometrics, specifically linguistics, transcribed in real time. But we run very structured interview processes that have been designed by business psychologists. And the point is, it measures what we call operational transformative collective leadership, in plain language, doing the day job, being an agent of change, creating workplace equality. So we can take you through this interview. And at the end of it, when it's finished, we'll not only have great transcripts and be able to go into it, but using that data set, we can model it on third-party lakes that help reinforce the positioning and surface pattern recognition insights about the individual. That starts to build a really interesting picture of them, so to speak. And we use that data and then human expertise to make recommendations, but it also shows potential areas of growth for that individual. So once the clients have taken it through the interview process and decided who they want to hire, and we've done all the basics, which everybody would do, we use these data sets to develop onboarding, integration, and acceleration coaching. And then we have, I think, circa a dozen really heavy hitting global executive leadership coaches that do the boards of Google and LVMH and Barclays and various others. And then they then partner that organization and person to help them be the best version of themselves at work. And that's really important for us, because if an executive fails in a role, very, very rarely is it their technical capability that lets them fail. It's normally the topic of culture. And it's not any of the buzzwords of cultural fit or addition. It's the simple fact of how that person integrates and navigates those 4 or 5 key stakeholder relationships within that first 1 to 200 days. So by taking what we do, we are mitigating that risk of failure. And I describe that as stopping the hole in the bottom line. Because if somebody does fail, the starting price for a junior exec is about 500,000 sterling as a cost basis. Obviously, that will change depending on audiences and scenarios and situations. But that hole in the bottom line is quite a serious serious problem for organizations. And then there's the whole diversity angle as well. Because of all the metrics, we can really start to empower an organization, and the data is all independent, it's all third party, and it all stands up to external audits, which means if a company wishes so, they can actually put it in their ESG statement and their board packs, and it allows them to take a whole different approach, challenging groupthink, divergent thinking versus systematic thinking. So does this start to bring it to life to you a little bit?
Yeah. I'm kind of curious as to what level of, a company, would you, I mean, obviously I don't know how applicable Inbeta would be to a startup compared to a well-established, 1,000, 5,000 employee company.
Yeah. So our smallest client at the moment is 65 million in turnover. To kind of give you an idea of size, they have about 600 people in their business. At their executive level, they've only got 7. And then it's pretty junior off the back of that. The advantage of a startup, if it was funded and backed by VC, PE, and it's got the ability of high growth, by using some of the cultural metrics and the diagnostic maps that we have, you can design teams and architect teams because you'll know how everybody will work together. And if you understand culture and cultural intelligence, which we have the ability to do, you know what pillars will help enhance a team and go from there. Because in the topic of building teams, everybody wants a more diverse workforce.
Right.
And I'm talking about diversity in the broadest sense of the word here. But the truth is, the more diversity you have, the more challenging it can be. And Inbeta allows an organization to really structure that quite differently. So if you are a smaller business and you were starting to scale, it's better scaling by design rather than putting a bunch of people in a room and just hope it works out. So it removes that gut feel by using data.
Okay, so what Inbeta does basically, and please, this is just my basic analogy here, is kind of like if your company was like a jigsaw puzzle, kind of. So you have this Inbeta is actually a program or a technology that will sift through all those pieces in the box and find that piece to go where it needs to go.
Yeah, look, Inbeta is a methodology, right? So we use lots of third-party tech. Some of it's off the shelf, some of it's built for us to be able to do what we do. And look, we're a startup to scale up in regards to size, right? We've recently closed funding. We're going into more funding rounds at the moment. So it's a lot better for us to buy tech that does what we need it to do rather than spend lots of money on trying to recreate the wheel. But the methodology, the way we describe the business is a developmental approach to talent acquisition. And it's removing the gut feel rather than just hiring and hoping it works out. It's giving you huge intelligence up front, which allows companies to make strategic decisions. And ultimately, this mitigates the risk of failure. And then because of the independent auditable data, it can go into some pretty delicate areas in regards to biases, empower diversity, inclusion, and that's really important. Okay,
yeah, that was my next question, actually. As far as, because for me personally, I'm sure a lot of our viewers, I'm not 100% clear on the data. So can you, through using Inbeta, can a company determine, like, for example, they want an employee like must love dogs or something like that? Is it on that type level? Like, this person has these attributes.
No, I wish, but no, it's not. It only looks at people from a professional lens. Okay. So a great way to do it is, so we don't have candidates or we don't have a database like recruitment companies do. What we have is real world, real time, and all the data is real world data. So in regards to ID, for example, if you are a big technologist and you have just been written up by TechCrunch, we would know that about you via public data. And then if we were looking for a slightly more junior individual, let's say chief products or architects or analysts, we can look at the people who are doing great things and then go down the org structures and start to work out more about them. The other things we can do in regards to technology specifically is if you say you need somebody to use a certain product. So for example, we talked about Shopify earlier. Let's say you need Shopify Plus as a technology platform that you want to use. Well, we can look at companies who are actively using Shopify Plus and then look at their org structures and then look at who's doing it in that business, rather than what is the more traditional way of doing it, which is focusing on job titles, industries, parallel clients. It just allows us to recut the cookie slightly differently. And this is what's important. Because otherwise you're just focusing on job titles and just it removes all of that guesswork and backs it up with hard data. Through the definition process, if, for example, a company asked us, we want to learn 4 or 5 specific things, because of the technology and the modules, we can surface pattern recognition around those points. And therefore we can provide MI or BI around those points. So if they said, I specifically want people to do this or this, then we could surface that. But I would also challenge that, because if they say, I specifically want somebody to do this for a reason because it will fit our organization, well, or maybe you might want to challenge that, and instead of having groupthink, you might want to have somebody who can add something different to the consideration, and the team. So it just allows us to restructure things very differently.
Okay, I see. So what exactly was the inspiration for you to step into this niche?
Look, I mean, I've been a headhunter for 13 years now, I think 14 maybe, and I was meant to be going to do an MBA. That was my plan, and then the pandemic hit, and I decided, in my former life I had done nearly a decade or where I was at, and my most popular piece of work was big technologists, big digital leaders and customer leaders. And when you spend a lot of time with those individuals, you start to, they talk about some really interesting stuff. And I couldn't understand why some of these technologies weren't being used in professional services. So I decided to come out of employment, and pandemic, everybody was doing what they were doing. And I found an incubator, an accelerator, that was backed by an American PE, a couple of big SaaS technology companies, and they did a 3-4 week L&D rotation where they released contents. There was working groups, Q&As, and at the end of it, if you wanted to, you could apply to go through pitching. But for me, I just did it to explore, learn, and kind of gain broader knowledge. And throughout that, I found even more technologies that I could easily utilize in my situation. So that's when I start engaging with some of my partners in the business and saying, look, I think we can do this. What's your appetite? And off the back of it, that's where this kind of started to bloom from. We're now a year and a bit down the line, and we're getting some pretty strong acceleration. We're going to exceed all our financial expectations for the year. And as I said, we're just going into the next stage of fund round now.
Well, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. Have you yet? And I'm curious. Like you're basically, in the midst of things. Would you say that you're still in the infant stage in beta? I mean.
Yeah. We're in beta, right? We always talk about ourselves. We're in constant development. I think, look, as a business, we were pre-revenue when we were building the MVP and the tech up until July. And that's when we started to socialize the business with various clients and get their feedback. And some of those conversations were really tough, actually, with a couple of PEs. But we got it to a stage where we knew it could work. And in August, we switched it, closed off, did all the tax things that we needed to do, and started going into trade. And then I guess in the past 12 to 18 weeks, we're actively in trade now. And we've already, as I said, accelerated the financial goals. We're in profit already for the year. closed the funding round with some pretty big backers. I mean, we've got backers from FTSE 100, FTSE 100 C-suites and so high profile angels, and now we're about to go into the venture capital stage. So we're moving from that super infant startup to actually, yes, this is working. It's starting to grow. It's starting to accelerate. But now it's about of transitioning it from startup to, I guess, scale up. What would be a fair. But ultimately, we want to go through the next funding round, which we should do, I think, early next year. And then in 2 or 3 years' time, we'll probably go for the next stage, which is, I guess, approaching the Series A. And that's when we want to go international, if the strategies and the plan works. So at the moment, I think we're about 11 people, plus all the coaches on top of that. And I expect we should be circa 50 individuals in 2-3 years. So that, yes, we're small. Yes, we're on a growth journey. And very much, as you said, in beta and in development ourselves, but there's glimmers of lights to say this is going to work.
All right, well, fantastic. Yeah. So you spoke about the coaches. I understand, Inbeta has quite a few additional aspects rather than just the data, compilation and those type things. So I mean, like, how exactly do you deploy the coaches?
Yeah, so every piece of talent acquisition we do, we couple it with one of our executive leadership coaches. But what makes this different, because lots of people do that, what makes this different is because of the data collation throughout the journey, the coach has the visibility to go back through everything that we've got, and can sit down with the individual and really start to understand them. And off the back of understanding them, they can work very quickly to outcomes. Also, by pulling them into this process, we can use them in various different ways. So, for example, there was a board role that we were doing recently where the individual needed assistance articulating strategy. So one of our coaches got involved in the interview process with them and actually had a couple of sessions to help kind of phrase how they narrated and pitched that topic. And off the back of that, they did incredibly well throughout the rest of the process, where right the way to the final stage, where they would have probably come out sooner rather than later if they hadn't had that intervention and support. So that's one example. Another example is we actually use the coaches to do assessment interviews, and we call them indexes. So instead of me doing it as a headhunter, we can get the coaches to do it. And these guys are a significant, big, front-facing corporate career individuals who've then moved into in-depth executive leadership coaching. They all have very different styles. I mean, we have one individual that specializes working with mothers who are going through attempting to become pregnancy, back into work. So it's a very specialized space. Also specializing in menopause, which is a topic that's not actively or widely discussed in corporate companies because people just don't feel comfortable around the topic. We have another individual that works with high net worth families, specifically their children who might be taking over these large organizations, about getting them into a position where they can do so and moving them into it rather than just giving them a family seat on the board. So there's various different niches that we utilize executive leadership coaching. But the big thing for us is them having the data, they can work on affecting outcomes. Whereas if without the data, you were just selecting a coach to a piece of recruitment, and that coach would then have to do their own due diligence on the individual, which takes on average 5 to 6 sessions. So this accelerates the whole process. The tech allows us to ID 3 to 4 times quicker than what the wider marketplace does. The way we define people by using the data allows us to start challenging bias and mitigating bias, which is stopping the revolving black door or the aging voodoo of what is an executive talent acquisition. And then finally, by using the coaching cohorts to actually affect positive outcomes, we can start to measure retention. Are we building better companies? What's the output of that situation? And that's really holding us to account, because at the moment, majority of executive headhunters across the world aren't actually held accountable for their work. Once they have finished the piece, they're off onto the next piece of work, whereas we're actually hanging around and I guess kind of putting our skin in the game. And that's the big thing for us. We want to say, in 3 years' time, when we look back on the work that we've done, did the people that we acquired, did they bring something different to the table? Did they build great teams, build great companies, drive businesses forwards? Are they still there? It's just putting a whole new lens onto the topic of conversation.
Right. Okay. So you are in the business of pretty much revolutionizing talent acquisition. So my question is, or my curiosity is, you take people and put them in companies. Is there an aspect of Inbeta where you can, the employee or the person says, I want this job. Do you search also for a company that may fit that person?
No, we don't. It's a simple answer.
Okay.
I know in America, people represent people and help move individuals around. In the UK, it's not as common. So we are very much on the side of the company.
Okay.
We do, when we provide our data maps, we can measure job seeking behavior by measuring somebody's digital footprints on sites like LinkedIn, for example. And if they are showing accelerated signs of job seeking behavior, then we badge them as potentially quicker to acquire, because from that point of view, so it allows us again to recut the data differently. But from Inbeta's perspective, we are a executive talent acquisition firm enabled by some pretty great technologies, and we're going to carry on developing that technology. Then at the same time, what we've got the platform, which is in testing stage at the moment, which we will allow people to use in companies to have access to our back-end technology. So if they want to do the recruitment themselves, they can take advantage of our ID tools. So for us, this is about being progressive, not performative. It's about bringing radical objectivity and seeing what others don't in the process. But it's important to get across that we are enabled by technology, but it's still led by humans. So the tech doesn't make the decisions.
Right.
And then ultimately, this is all about going way beyond just finding and acquiring an individual, but taking the long-term view of the benefit that they add to the organization.
Okay, so do you have any advice for someone, say a junior exec or someone who is on the threshold of moving into that stage of their career? Do you have any advice for those people, like when you talked about the digital footprint? Like, are there certain things that these people should really maybe pay more attention to, or maybe polish a little more, so that Inbeta will actually, like, I don't know, pick them up? I don't know if that's the correct term, but so that they become more visible to
yeah. So we always look for people through the professional lens. Obviously, there's a lot of rules around data, GDPR in Europe. Obviously, the UK has a mirrored policy of that. The US is a little bit different on their approach to data, but we always come from the lens of the professional standpoint. So we will look at companies, publications, RSS, specialized data lakes, etc., that collate this information. Then we also will look at platforms that are relating to professional work. We don't delve into social media. And that's quite important, I guess, to do. But you want to make sure that every individual has a professional digital image. Since the pandemic, we've all been pushed into remote situations, and the data has exploded. What people put about themselves online in the last couple of years is just dramatically different than it was before. And without this global acceleration of digital first, I don't think we would be able to do what we're doing now. So I think, look, if you're going to give advice to people, yeah, make sure your digital footprint is professional and is going to be okay and stand up to scrutiny, because the last thing
Right.
you want to do is fall over in that point of view. But I mean, if somebody's looking to grow, I mean, the way an organization grows talent is you either build it, buy it, bridge it, or borrow it. Is the four B's are the predominant ways. And it depends which strategy an organization takes, but I think individuals in a company should also take a similar strategy. Are you rotating? Are you learning? Are you being succession plan, career plan, shadow boards, for example? And the one thing that has really come out in the last couple of years, and I do it myself, right? If you have a strong mindset and the ability to learn, and a desire to do so, you can be really, really successful. Now, I mean, if you want to surround yourself with the right books, the right people, the right, even on your Instagrams and stuff, if you want to follow the right influencers on your topic, you can pretty much curate your own universe load, Google alerts, for example, on articles and things that you're interested in. So if you unfollow all the stuff that you shouldn't really distract you, and you really kind of delve yourself, you can upskill yourself pretty quickly now.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like you said, I know you said Inbeta doesn't really focus on social media, but I think that is very important for people to remember. Inbeta may not focus on it, but these potential companies, that you have, you dream to work for. I mean, how many people have we seen, their demise come from, tweets from 5-6 years ago? It's you have to be extremely careful these days.
Yeah, we don't go into that world, but I know companies do, and companies do run full background checks, social media checks, positions, and I've heard stories of people about to achieve significant funding for organizations, which has been pulled at the last moment because of something they did on Facebook years ago or Twitter. So I think whatever you say in the public digital world, you have to be comfortable being held to account on that topic. And therefore, micro blogs like Twitter, I mean, I'm not a Twitter user, but micro blogs like Twitter, you've got to be quite cautious on what you say and how you do it.
Right. Yeah. I don't do the Twitter either. It's possibly the most toxic place that doesn't exist. Like it's complete insanity over there.
I'm finding the whole development areas of things like the metaverse and what Facebook have come out with recently, and their future way of working. I'm also was reading about Microsoft's the other day and about how they're elevating their own metaverses as well. I found that a really interesting topic, and I think that's going to be something that will change the way of work in the next stage as well. So there's loads of different ways we can go into this, but I think, yeah, look, if you're looking to become the exec of the future, you want to make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right information and the right people, right? There's that expression that is widely utilized. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. It's the same with the information.
Right, exactly. So how does a company utilize Inbeta? Do they, do you call send an email or subscribe on your website? Like, how exactly does this marriage occur?
So it's very much a strategic partnership. So, I mean, obviously, yes, you can get in contact with us via the website. You can sign up to the blogs, the information, the intelligence, or get us on our social channels, which is predominantly, I guess, for us in the world of employment, LinkedIn. But most of our work at the moment is coming from referral and network. As we start to scale, we'll more proactively outreach. But from our point of view, we sign an MSLA with a business that dictates how we work with them, what we do, when we'll do it, and on all the things behind it. And then it's about really starting to understand them, becoming their critical friends, understanding the organizational design, the target operating model, the overarching strategy, and then where they need assistance. And that's when we really start getting into the mix. And depending on what the answers are to those questions is depending on where we go next. Sometimes it's talent acquisition, sometimes it's surfacing organizational tension, sometimes it's providing a cultural diagnostic of the organization from a high level map perspective, so you understand how people will integrate with different people. It all depends on what the challenges are. But predominantly for us, it's that exec level -2, 3, depending on size and scale of business. And we work very much in consumer and technology and retail focused organizations.
Right. So is it plausible or maybe even common for Inbeta to, what's the word I want to use here? Maybe shuffle executives in a company?
It depends what you mean by the word shuffle. Is and you mean move them around internally in the organization?
Yeah, internally. Yeah. It's like, well, according to the data and everything that we've got from everything, like you would probably be more productive and beneficial on the, I don't know, research side rather than the sales side or something like that.
Yeah, look, I mean, our leadership coaches can use various different tools in their toolkits to help surface organizational tension and develop individuals. And I guess use your word, shuffle them. I mean, in our talent acquisition, we often have internal candidates from the organization be put into the mix. So they are judged with the same level of scrutiny as individuals externally. We don't always find people who are external to the organization. Sometimes the best person is sitting there and you just haven't been given the ability to shine, and then we can help reinforce that and say, actually, no, you've already got the best person. But just to give you reassurance, yes, we benchmark the externals as well.
Okay, well, I think that would be extremely helpful. Coming from a sector where not necessarily nepotism, but there is a strong camaraderie. People have been doing these jobs for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It kind of becomes I don't want to exclude the female workers, obviously, but it kind of becomes like a brotherhood. So they lose this ability to move, maybe their right hand man. It's like, well, how about you you do this. They're a little bit apprehensive to make those moves.
I mean, look, this is getting into the topic of diversity and inclusion, which is incredibly important, right? Businesses need to have people from a variety of different backgrounds, whether that's ethnicities, genders, geographics, neurodiversity, disabilities is incredibly, incredibly important. So organizations that, to use your word, operate a bit like a brotherhood or a group and have grown together. I mean, those are organizations that will have groupthink. And groupthink's not great. Right, the pandemic has really accelerated groupthink. Everybody's been having interesting digital conversations over the past 2 years, but whilst we've all been at home, as soon as these cameras turn off, we go back downstairs to the heart of families, and our families are people that we spent the most time with, predominantly, especially if you've been in countries like Australia or the UK or which has experienced lockdowns. So that's where groupthink is starting to do. So now people are coming out of these environments. So I hope we are anyway. It's a bit dicey here at the moment. It's important to be open to different people. And so this is where the topic of cultural intelligence comes into consideration. And we use with a relationship with the CQC in America, the Cultural Intelligence Center, who own the largest D&I data set on this topic. With their help and with our technologies throughout talent acquisition, we demonstrate individuals' drive, strategy, knowledge, action to deal with people who are different than they are. And that's really important, because if you understand people from different cultures, you can get the most out of teams, and therefore organizations which are potentially a bit insular or have grown together miss out on the benefits there. And there's many studies which show homogeneous diversity in teams far outperforms people that potentially stay around and don't look outside of the places where they've been fishing all that time.
Right. Yeah, I do quite a bit of talking with Japanese professionals, and it's really amazing. They're actually going through, we're talking about inclusion and diversity. They're actually going through a cultural shift, like as we speak, where women are being more accepted into executive positions, and I guess the older generation of these executives are starting to either step down or maybe understand. So I feel like it's, especially for that culture, and that's been a very successful nation as far as production, global economy, and all of that. So yeah, I guess yeah.
I was going to interject. I mean, understanding inclusion on a global basis and cultures is incredibly important. So, right, if we wanted to change with a trade, with a Japanese business, it would be foolish of us not to understand their culture and how they do what they do, and therefore make sure we build that into our behaviors, and from that side, it's the same as, especially for global organizations, culture is why things normally don't work. As I said, it's so, for example, the difference between Southern Italian and Northern Italian is dramatic. Northern Italian being more Anglo in their behavior patterns, and Southern Italians are different. But in the UK, culture is a big thing. I mean, I can go a mile down the road where the look, feel, language, dialects, everything's very different, right? So you've got to make sure the more you understand, the more you adjust your behaviors, and the better you'll get out of individuals. So culture is incredibly important, and that cultural intelligence, which is widely referred to as CQ. Nicola in our business is utterly brilliant at it. But yeah, from our side, everybody who's front office or front point has to be certified as a cultural intelligence leadership coach as a bare minimum.
Wow.
So there's loads of things we do around that.
Right. Yeah. I think, especially now that the world is so connected, it's obviously it would be extremely difficult to understand every culture, but those type, just the mentality of understanding a difference, or maybe not understanding, but understanding that there is a difference is a very big benefit for, especially in the executive department of any company, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into Google and you can find some pretty big faux pas where people have made mistakes. I mean, there was a major car manufacturer that decided to, I think it was in Brazil, name one of their cars something which in America was completely fine, but in Brazil it meant something very, very different. And so moving cultural intelligence is not just around how you engage with people, but it's in how you engage with markets. But CQ can be a predictor of performance. It can help you understand negotiation, profitability, but then it also can move into personal well-being, because once you understand your cultural intelligence, it's a choice every day, every moment, of how you interact and how you engage with people who are different than you. Whereas if you take, for example, EQ or IQ's fixed, right? Even emotional intelligence in a little bit of a way, but CQ can be taught and can be definitely grown, I guess.
Right. Well, all right. So what would you say is the next? I know you said you have another round of funding coming up, but I don't know how much you could speak on future plans or.
Yeah. So look, I mean, we're hiring. So people who want to work in really forward-thinking, innovative talent business, we're actively looking to hire and grow at all levels of the business. We're looking for more people who want to strategically partner us to build stronger leadership teams, which are more homogenous and actually affect outcomes and drive better performance. So we're also looking from that perspective. Yeah, we're also going into another funding round. So the next funding round for us is going to open up early next year. And that's going to be really important for us. We're on our way to we're on our way to try and become a B Corp business. So we we talk the talk and we walk the walk in regards to our ethics, our behaviors, our morals, as well. We're starting to look at international work as well. We've been predominantly UK focused to this point in time. We've just started taking on American work as well. So that's going to be really exciting for us because we want this business to grow quickly. We want it to grow globally. So we would like to have boots on the ground in the US in the not too distant future, realistically, probably 12 to 18 months, I would have thought. But yeah, so I mean, that kind of gives you a little bit of where we're going. It's just a crazy journey. It's moving incredibly fast, and we're very, very busy. So we're being very cautious that we don't take on too much and overpromise and underdeliver. We make sure we do exactly what we say we do when we say we're going to do it. But yeah, it's all starting to grow.
That's fantastic. That's great to hear. I think now maybe, obviously you said in a year and a half. I think from what I've been, I don't live in the US. I'm from there, but I don't live there, and for various reasons. But I feel like, I feel like the US is very close to having a job market boom. If a few small things could be fixed, then I think, there'll be a lot of American-based companies hiring a lot of upper-level people.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, America's a leader in global consumer and technology. So for us, it's an obvious place that we want to go and operate within. I think it's really interesting as well when you start looking at international hires who can bring different things to the table. And that's another big strength. So for US organizations looking at bringing in European talent or Asian talent, I think there's a lot of learnings there too. And by using somebody like us and using these cultural drivers that we've been talking about, you can make sure that they implement and accelerate. And if there is anything from a risk perspective, you can mitigate it from day one. The last thing you want to do is, for example, to use your narrative of Japan, if you're putting a high-profile female leader into a board in Japan, you want to make sure that she's confident and she doesn't have imposter syndrome, for example. Is an important one to go into. So our tools just allow this risk mitigation.
Okay, that's great. Well, James, thank you for joining us today.
No, I really enjoy these conversations with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
At times now, and we've talked about a lot of different things. So yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me and having the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime, if any announcements or, you just want to chit chat, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll definitely make it happen.
Wonderful. Look, I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, and catch up with you again soon.
All right. Great. We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.